Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is Daily Drop number 195. We've had some significant news break over the last 24, 36 hours or so. And one of the most significant pieces of the news has been Judge Preska's ruling about releasing documents in the case between Ghislaine Maxwell and Virginia Roberts. Now, we know that Preska has been on the fence about this. There's been a lot of back and forth between both sides. There has been a lot of cajoling, and there has been a lot of maneuvering by the defense in this case to try and keep these documents sealed. Well, it looks like Judge Preska has decided to move in a different direction, and she's going to start naming some names on a rolling basis. This is a big victory, especially coming on the heels of what happened in the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. This is a big victory for the survivors and for people looking for justice in this case, because these people have been given this whole entire cloak of secrecy for way too long. If you were involved in this case and you were involved with Jeffrey Epstein and you were enabling him, or you were part of the trafficking ring or anything like that, your name needs to come out, your role needs to be put on blast, and you need to answer some questions. Because for too long were these people able to hide under the guise of the loopholes that were provided to them by the numbskulls in Congress. And after those loopholes were turned into were written into the laws, well, these high-profile lawyers like Dershowitz are able to navigate those loopholes and make sure their scummy friends aren't put on blast or their crimes aren't brought to light. Well, Judge Preska's ruling here and her way of going about it is going to put an end to that, hopefully. So, let's jump into the article and see what it has to say. This article is from lawandcrime.com. The author of the article is Jerry Lamb. Headline: Judge accelerates process for unsealing Jeffrey Epstein documents, naming names on a rolling basis. Again, that is like the kind of headline that makes you want to do handstands, backflips, and cartwheels, right? Because we haven't seen too much good news like this coming out of the federal court in regards to this case. Hell, in regards to anything at this point. But in this case especially, it's been, setback after setback for these survivors, when it's obvious to anyone paying attention that this whole entire process should be expedited, it should be moving forward, and all of these people who were involved, all of these people who were named in the court documents, etc., if they had a role to play, they should all be slapped with a RICO charge, and this ball should get rolling. A federal judge in New York on Friday amended the protocol the court will follow in releasing a trove of documents concerning deceased pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. This will allow for documents that include the names of non-party individuals to be released on a rolling basis. The documents in question are part of a defamation dispute involving Epstein's alleged madam, you mean co-conspirator and partner in crime, right? Ghislaine Maxwell, and alleged victim Virginia Roberts. Now, we know that there is a lot of names to be named in this case. We've already seen some of the names that have rolled out. We've seen some of the dumps. We've seen people like Len Dubin get named, etc. And we know that with these other documents that are still in the possession of the court that have not been released, we know for a fact that it's going to out many, many more powerful people. And that is why these documents have still not been released, because these powerful people will do anything that they possibly can to keep the public from knowing what was happening behind the curtain. And they're usually able to do that with help from their lapdogs in the legacy media. But nowadays, well, that whole entire party has come to a screeching halt. Though Roberts' defamation case against Maxwell ended in 2015, Roberts' attorneys have fought a protracted legal battle seeking to unseal documents initially filed under seal that may contain allegations against other public figures from Epstein's infamous elite social circle. And may contain allegations. I understand Law and Order being a a law type of blog here, a law type of outlet, they're going to definitely cover their ass. But may contain allegations, let's be honest, definitely contain allegations. It's definitely going to be explosive stuff. And we know that there are going to be some people who have never even been brought up in the case that get brought up in those documents. So as soon as they start being released, I can only imagine how quickly they're going to be devoured by interested parties, myself included, considering we have all of this time on our hands right now. So let's get the documents released, Judge Preska. Let's start tomorrow. Senior U.S. District Judge Loretta Preska previously ruled that only those motions which now deceased U.S. District Judge Robert Sweet ruled on when he presided over the litigation, and documents relevant to those motions will be released to the public after the court conducts an individualized review of each sealed item. Preska issued a brief order on Monday clarifying how the court will proceed with the document review process, how it will notify non-parties to the litigation who are named in the documents but may wish to argue against the release of all or some of the documents. So Judge Preska has revised her rulings, and she has issued an order that clarified what those rulings are, stipulating what the process will be, how they will name the people, who will be named in the documents, or those parties that are named in the documents, what they can do going forward, etc., etc. So basically, she has issued a ruling releasing the parameters of how this documentation is going to be released to the public. The non-parties include a person or persons who produced or answered discovery based upon the representation or understanding that the discovery would be subject to the protective order previously issued in this action. B. Persons who are identified as having allegedly engaged in sexual acts with plaintiff or other alleged victims or allegedly facilitated such acts. Persons whose intimate, sexual, or private conduct is described in the sealed materials, and D, persons who are alleged to have been victimized. Wow. So that is who the non-parties include in this case. And if for the purposes of this case, if they're named in those documents and they're considered a non-party and they fall into one of those categories, A, B, C, or D, well, they can expect their documentation to be released in this case. So that's pretty insane. That's a pretty far-reaching ruling here, and it's going to give the public a real good look behind the scenes. Now, I will say, I'm skeptical how much of it won't be redacted still, and only for the simple reason that we know the government loves to do that. So I'm really hoping for complete transparency, completely unredacted documentation for the most part, and a real good look at the people who participated in not only enabling Jeffrey Epstein's behavior, but partaking as well. And what it will do is it will clarify for a lot of other people who might be following the case from afar just how deep and how far this case reaches. And I just don't know how anybody who is provided with all of the evidence that we have been provided with so far in this case can look at it and just shrug their shoulders and say, just a sick guy. Because there is obviously so much more here. There is obviously so many more layers to it than that. And when it's presented as such, when it's presented as, just some sick guy, got caught being a sick bastard, it takes away from the true nature and the true essence of how evil this whole entire trafficking organization was, this criminal enterprise. And what it does is it makes people think that it just happened and it was a one-off, right? When in reality, we know that this is happening a lot more than any of us would ever want to believe. And I know that definitely goes for me. Before I started researching this case, I always shrugged off the rumors and the innuendo and the basic narrative that these people in power were this sick. Well, I knew they were sick, right? I knew they were thieves. I knew they were crooks. But I never knew the true depths of their evil. And the further you get into researching this case and branching off and looking underneath all the different layers and finding out how sick the people that are associated with Epstein were or are, and how sick the entire ruling class or so-called ruling class is. It's really an eye-opening experience. And for the last 10 or 11 months or so, for me, it has been one wild ride. The court will review the material in groups determined by the non-party individuals named in the documents, beginning with all documents mentioning Doe number 1 and Doe number 2. So it will be, like the ruling stated, a rolling release. So Preska and the lawyers will get together and they'll decide what they want to put up for release, and then the court will approve it and get it out into circulation. At least that's what I'm getting from this. Again, I am not a lawyer, right? So I don't, when it comes to the fine details of this kind of stuff, I just try and give you guys the basic outline here. And, there are much more qualified people to talk about the legal aspects than me. But when you look at the overall presentation for how Preska is going to go forward with this, her outline and her blueprint is very apparent on what she wants to do here. According to Preska, that means only Does 1 and 2 will be notified in the first instance, that they are named in the documents and have a chance to argue why all or some of the documents should not be made public. All right, so what that means is she's going to definitely contact the people who are named here, Doe 1 and 2, and they'll have a chance to make their case why this information should not be made public. And Preska will listen to it, and then she'll make a ruling one way or the other if they should have their information sealed, or if the public is entitled to see who these people are. Because several non-party individuals may appear in a single document, this potentially meant it could take several rounds of litigation before a single document was made public. However, in order to accelerate the release process, Preska agreed to unsealing portions of documents mentioning non-parties rather than waiting to unseal the entirety of a given document until all non-parties have provided input. That will make the process move a lot quicker. And I think what it does, it shows you what Preska's thinking is here at this point in the case. Now, I was very unsure of how Preska was going to proceed previously, and in fact, I was pretty critical of the fact that this stuff wasn't released earlier. But it looks like she's following a game plan here, and it looks like this stuff is going to be released. And it also looks like she's going pretty hard in the paint with it, right? She wants to accelerate the process. She's had enough of the feet being dragged around here, and she wants to get some movement in the case, it looks like. So that's definitely a good thing, and it definitely favors the survivors here, because I have a funny feeling that Preska might go scorched earth. She might just go ahead and release all of this stuff and just let it take on a life of its own. And that's what should really happen, right? We're the taxpayers of this country. We paid for all of this information to be, put together in the court system. All of that. And it is important that the public gets to see in full transparency what occurred in this case and just what kind of deal Epstein and his friends received, not only the first time, but after that. I mean, we got the reports out now about Harvard, which we're going to get into later on. But look, this guy Jeffrey Epstein and his crew, they were involved in some serious high-level operations. And I don't think that fact has fallen flat on Preska. She has seen the evidence. She's seen all of this stuff. And now it looks like to me that she is really going to go and release as much of this stuff as possible. So I'm really hoping that that's where we're at, and I hope that's what we see from Judge Preska. Preska reiterated that if the process proves unworkable or inefficient, the court can revisit the review protocol. So that gives her the option to go back and review what's going on and to make sure the program's working, make sure that it's running correctly, make sure that all parameters are being met, etc., etc. And that's a good move on her behalf, right? That shows that she's willing to adjust on the fly and she's not just locked into one way of doing things, and that is definitely going to be a good thing moving forward. Now, in the description box, when you download this episode, you'll be able to find this article. Make sure you click on it if you want to read the whole entire order below. It's on Scribed, and it's in this article, so you can definitely check out the 2 pages of that here. And if you want to go ahead and read through the article again, you can do that as well. But this order by Preska and the movement we see in the court here is a big deal, and I think it's preceding what's going to happen down in the Virgin Islands very soon. I think that we're going to see that come to a bit of a head down there, and I think you're going to see Indike and Khan be forced to relent a bit, and I think that George will be able to get some of the stipulations that she was seeking and get the state to move towards a more fair and, quick payment procedure, because we know that they love to drag their feet. We know that Khan and Indike, they don't want to serve up any of this money. If it's up to them, they'd love to sit on it forever, right? Why do they want to pay it out? So again, folks, this case has many different layers. It's happening in many different courtrooms around the nation and, in fact, around the world at this point. And all we can do right now is continue to follow it as closely as possible and make sure that we're staying on top of things as best we can, because you look at this article, and they released it on a Friday, right? What have I talked about here on the podcast before about their Friday dumps when they're trying to bury information? And that's what it looks like here. They're trying to bury this on a Friday. But that's okay. We're here to make sure that it does not get buried. The other content creators out there, they're here to make sure it does not get buried. And in fact, it didn't get buried, and it will not get buried. This kind of stuff is way too important to the case, and what it does is it shows people who are following and people who are really rooting for justice in this case that hope is not lost. I've seen a lot of people feeling down and out after the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals ruling, and I was telling people then that, this isn't the end. It's just, another bump in the road, and there's going to be a lot of them. There's even going forward. There's still a long way to go before justice is had in this case. But it's a road worth traveling, it's a journey worth taking, and it's certainly a fight worth waging. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All right, folks, until tomorrow, I hope everybody has a fantastic evening.